The volume down just a little bit.
Down.
Just down a little. Oh, probably. Yeah. So that was down on two part, maybe. It's too much space. That's good, that's fine. Thank you.
That's probably. Yeah. Turn on the screen.
Yeah, it's the.
Isn't that east?
Technology.
No,
You may switch the source.
she's switched automatically. Not.
Maybe all, you can get started.
There you go.
Oh, excellent. Thank you.
Sometimes someone's.
No, all good, it happens. Much appreciation. Appreciation, no worries.
Been over there.
Okay, I think we're ready, up and running, live, streamed. All equipment is a go. So first, the planning director will be reading the preamble and then we'll call the roll to the meeting. So Director Wong.
In compliance with notification requirements of Ohio's open meeting law and section 101.021 of the Codified Ordinances of Cleveland, Ohio, 1976, notice of this meeting has been publicly posted. All boards and commissions under the purview of the City Planning Department conducts its meetings according to Robert's Rules of Order. Actions during the meeting will be taken by voice vote. Abstentions from any vote due to a conflict of interest should be stated for the record prior to the taking of any vote. In order to ensure that everyone participating in the meeting has the opportunity to be heard, we ask that you use the raise hand feature before asking a question or making a comment. The raise hand feature can be found in the participants panel on the desktop and mobile version and activated by clicking the hand icon. Please wait for the chair or facilitator to recognize you and be sure to select unmute and announce yourself before you speak. When finished speaking, please lower your hand by clicking on the raise hand icon again and mute your microphone. We will also be utilizing the chat feature to communicate with participants. The chat feature can be activated by clicking the chat button located on the bottom of the WebEx screen. Call-in users can unmute by using *6. Slide, please. All meeting activity is being recorded via the WebEx platform. These proceedings are also being live streamed via YouTube. All requests to speak on a particular matter via our website, email, and phone number have been considered. We've also received emails from those who have provided written comments on a particular matter. Proper channels for comments are listed below. Any and all communications with members of this body that are not communicated during a meeting of this body and or do not follow procedures for public comment established by this body are unwelcome and will be disregarded. And you'll see that there are 3 different channels for public comment for projects: sending an email, calling or leaving a message, and sending a letter, or dropping off comments at City Hall. With that, I'll turn it back over to the chair.
Okay, let's call the roll.
Anthony. Downing.
Present.
Luther.
Present.
Curry.
Present.
Craig Scott.
Denise, you online?
Yes.
Right. Present.
We have a quorum. Okay, welcome everyone to the meeting. First order of business is to approve minutes from the 2 previous meetings. Yes.
The March 17th meeting, this body tabled the minutes from March 3rd, so they can.
Oh, we'll remove them first, and we're gonna do them separately as well. So okay. So, so what we'll do first is address the March 3rd minutes. And I'll need a motion to remove them from the table before we vote to approve them.
Someone. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Call the roll.
Downing.
I'm going to abstain because I was not present at the March 3rd meeting.
Luther.
Yes.
Curry.
Yes,
And Craig Scott.
I saw her say yes, but I didn't hear it.
And what?
Yes.
Okay, that minutes have been removed from the table. Motion carries. So now I'll need a motion to approve them. We have a copy here at the table, and we received them in advance. So can I have a motion to approve the March 3rd minutes?
The March 17th.
No, March 3rd. First, yeah, March 3rd. You weren't at March 3rd.
That's right.
Yes, March 3rd. Go ahead.
Someone. Second.
Motion and a second. Call the roll.
Downing.
Abstain.
Luther.
Yes.
Curry.
Yes.
Craig Scott.
You're on mute.
You're still on mute.
You can use *6 if you're on your phone.
You want to try *6, Denise?
Can you give us a thumbs up or thumbs
Give
down?
us a thumbs up.
Just a
No.
no.
You can't hear us either.
Just gonna have to close out.
Okay,
Well, we have a.
we have a quorum, so let's have her abstain. Yep.
Slide.
Yes.
Okay, motion carries. To the March 17th minutes, which we have before us as well, which was the last meeting. And I think the councilman is going to abstain too, who is not here.
A move to approve.
And I'll second.
Motion and a second. We call the roll.
Downing.
Yes.
Luther.
Yes.
Curry.
Yes,
Craig Scott.
she just logged off.
One slide.
Let's stay.
Okay, motion still carries with an abstention, so we're okay on that, for a quorum. And hopefully she'll come back on, shortly, and log back in. And while she's doing that, I can read, the rules for the next item. It's a zoning map amendment. And for zoning matters, these are public hearings. And so with, zoning, we, regularly hear presentation from staff directly of the proposed rezoning. And the commission can ask questions directly of staff. Then we'll hear sponsor testimony. This could be the council person or the owner of the property. And then we will take public comment since this is a public hearing. First, we'll hear from proponents, those in favor of the zoning change, and then second, we'll hear from opponents. Before you give your view, either in person or online, please state your name clearly, your organization and address, or simply your address if you're a nearby affected property owner. And please keep your statement to 3 minutes or less so we can move on to other business on a timely manner. So with that, the first item is an unnumbered ordinance, and it's removing the 1/3 foot specific map setback from the street center line and north and south sides of Broadway between Gallup and East 55th. And I assume that you are here to present this one. You've got 2 roles today.
Yeah.
So, David, go ahead.
Thanks. Good morning, commission and audience. Cedar Bay, senior assistant city planner in the zoning section of city planning department. And so today, we're gonna be going over this removal of the 43-foot setback from the street center line along Broadway Avenue. And so some of the purposes behind this is really to kind of like bring the existing buildings to compliance, really promoting walkability along Broadway. Without removing this setback, the Board of Zoning Appeals isn't allowed to give variance for front yard setbacks. Next slide, please. And so this here's some of the Cleveland context, looking at Ward 5, and I highlighted there in yellow this segment of Broadway Ave that we're going to be removing the setback from. Next slide, please. Thanks. And so here's just some of the facts about map setbacks. We usually go over this every time we talk about these. Just to remind you that they can only be changed with legislation. They take precedence over all other setback regulations. This isn't. Board of Zoning Appeals cannot give variances for things that are trying to impede the setback, the front yard setback. Next slide, please. And so here's just some of the history. That might be a little harder to see from a distance, but pretty much we just have 2 different maps, right? The one on top is the current zoning map, along with some of the map setbacks, and then the one on the bottom is a historic map. Really just wanted to bring this up because the origin of that 43-foot setback was really during the time when there was like a lot of mass exodus of people moving out of the city into the suburbs. And so this was kind of like almost like an attempt to try to form our neighborhood similar to suburbs with that like those wider front yards. So yeah, this is just a snippet of that map change that was back in 1943. Just basically really to kind of bring that point up. This setback actually expands from downtown all the way to Garfield Heights, and so we're really only looking at this segment today because it's attached to some other future phases of rezonings that I'm about to talk about in a minute. Next slide, please. So here's some of the existing conditions. Again, it might be a little harder to see from a distance. Basically, really wanted to show this because you can see how the building form is. A lot of these buildings are already right up against Broadway Ave. Next slide, please. And so here's just these next slides are going to have a lot of existing conditions, starting from like that northern or northwestern part of Broadway Ave, right next to that I-77 exit. So you can just kind of see a lot of the building form on the bottom picture, really right there up against the sidewalk. Next slide, please. And so the picture on the very top is some residential right there along Broadway. In the middle is a new development that we actually mapped the UFO or urban form overlay on that frontage. So that's why it's actually kind of closer because urban form overlay has 0 to 8 foot setback. And then the bottom picture there, just you can see some more of that, just the current form. Next slide, please. Some more of the existing conditions, you can see how that form just kind of keeps going up there along Broadway. Buildings are already right there up against the sidewalk. Next slide, please. So you can see that form all the way down from Gallup to East 55th. Thanks. And so here are the future phase 1 and 2 of rezoning that we're proposing on Broadway in the future. I just wanted to bring that up just because it's kind of this map change to remove the 43-foot setback is going to help this whole process. So next slide, please. That's just it. Highlighted in purple is the map setback segment that we're removing today, or proposing to remove today, going from Gallup to East 55th on both sides of Broadway. Also, I did want to mention that Slavic Village Development, is online. That they that comment if they'd like, if they express any feedback, please. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. First, before we go on to the comments of the proponents, any questions, technical questions about the rezoning from commission members? Okay. Anyone, who now would like to speak in favor of the zoning change, if you're online, if you could just raise your hand and I'll be able to call on you, or if you're here in person. So anybody who would like to speak in favor of the zoning change, and this could be the CDC or anyone. I see Greta. Greta, you want to go
Good
ahead?
morning. Yeah, good morning. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
All right. My name is Greta Thomas. Thank you for having me this morning. I work for Slavic Village Development, and I'm the Business Development Associate. And we spoke with Xavier and Shannon this week, and we are in support of the rezoning to remove the 43-foot setback.
Okay. Thank you very much. Anyone else in favor of this zoning change? Anyone opposed to the zoning change or could have a question? Anybody here? I don't see any hands raised. So we'll close the public portion and ask commission members for any discussion or motion.
Madam Chair, I move approval of this amendment, removing the 43-foot specific map setback from street center line on the north and south sides of Broadway Avenue between Gallup and East 55th Street.
Second.
A motion and a second. Can you call the roll, Michael?
Young,
Yes.
Luker,
Yes.
Curry.
Yes.
Attorney Scott,
yes,
Sly.
Yes.
Motion carries. As just a note, 43-foot setback is a very large one. So curious where that came from and why it's 43 specifically, but that's a whole other.
Madam Chair, I'd like to request in the future, if there's a speaker, that they stand over here.
Okay.
Because he was out of the view of the camera.
Oh, okay. Great thought. I don't know if you heard that, but that's a great thought.
Okay.
All right, the second item is a telecommunications tower. This is permanent parcel number 008-017-043. The address is at 3269 West 17th Street. And this is a application from Northern Ohio Cellular to enlarge an existing legal non-conforming 130-foot high telecommunications tower by extending 20 feet, co-locating antennas and install equipment cabinets and a 20 kilowatt diesel generator in a 2-family district with a maximum height requirement of 35 feet. So once again, in this matter, we will hear from Shannon from the staff first, and then we will open this up to the sponsor and then to any public comment. So Shannon, please give us the background.
Good morning. Next slide, please. Shannon Leonard, Chief Running Planner, City Planning Commission. So originally when this application came in, it was for the extension of a 130-foot tall telecommunication tower by 20 feet. They want to co-locate antennas and install. They're no longer installing the equipment cabinets, which kind of changes this a little bit. And the 20 kilowatt diesel generator will be inside the compound. This is located in a 2-family residential district. The reason purpose for this is they were on the Metro Health Tower. When the tower came down, the new tower does not have enough room for the AT&T equipment. And so the AT&T equipment has to take the tower that they had on Metro Health and spread it out across 3 sites. They have given us this information last night regarding the coverage and some of the reasoning as to why. Now, since they have removed the cabinets at the base and they're not changing the exterior of the compound, we are preempted from denying their conditional uses and their variances. And in that case, our law department just wants us to review for the conditional uses with the history and just some added comment. We did send out 72 notices in English and Spanish to the surrounding neighborhood because this is in a residential district. Next slide, please. Again, this is in the two-family residential district next to the I-71 corridor in the Clark Fulton neighborhood. Next slide. Actually, this is Tremont. Next slide, please. These are just some site locations, existing conditions. Part of the application when they're either co-locating to a new tower, extending a tower, creating a new tower, is to provide some site location photographs as well as the conditional uses. Generally, the conditional uses are dependent on meeting a variety of characteristics that I'll go through in the next slide. Next slide, please. Again, these are some existing conditions showing they are within the two-family residential district. Next slide, please. Again, these are just locations. So this on the left side is the original tower. On the right side that you'll see is the extension of the 20 feet. Next slide, please. And again, just some more information. This was the original drawing that they had given us when we had first initially put them on the planning commission agenda. They are not installing any cabinets on the outside of the compound. Everything is going to be either interior and then the proposed height extension of 20 feet. Next slide, please. And so generally, when you're looking at conditional uses, you're looking at the location, you're looking at the setback from residential districts. They are within a residential district. The height, they're going up 20 feet, which is taller than the existing zoning district, which is 35 feet. So they're going to be 155 feet. Next slide, please. Again, aesthetic design, with the previous submission with the cabinets, this commission could have talked about the aesthetic designs, as well as the security fencing and landscaping. They were out of compliance with our zoning code as it relates to landscaping. Next slide, please. And so the original conversation was about the Spectrum Act, and this is what preempts us from being able to really deny the application, but we can still discuss it and you can still grant them their conditional uses, just to bring them in compliance with our zoning code. Essentially, because they're removing that cabinet, the base, they are preempted from meeting the landscaping requirements. The landscaping section of our chapter was instituted essentially after this compound went into effect. So this was existing prior to the introduction of that section of our zoning code. However, I believe, the residents and city planning previously, before they removed that extra cabinet, would have liked to see landscaping here because it is an obscure this compound because it is in a residential district. Next slide, please. And so the conditions is that the expansion of the non-conforming tower 20 feet to 150 feet, so from 130 to 150, with the 9 additional towers, no cabinet, and the diesel generator meet all applicable standards and 354, and is a design appropriate and compatible with surrounding uses. And so this one is a little bit difficult also in the fact that when you're talking about these towers and understanding the need for, more digital connectivity, we've also been informed by like mortgage brokers and things of that nature that anybody that falls within that drop zone, which is 3 times the height of the tower, has problems getting financing, mortgages, things of that nature. And so initially, us as city planning did not support this. And if we had that option, I don't think we would support this, only because now we're expanding that drop zone, creating a more of an issue with all the homes in the surrounding area. So just something to keep in mind and consider. But again, this is a conditional use case. They need the conditional uses to install the antennas. Thank you.
Any questions, comments, Parkin? Curious, why do banks look at that drop down, do you know?
In terms of if it falls, I guess,
Oh,
a
it's
storm of some
sort of-
sort.
So
Yeah.
just-
And so like we had a mortgage broker for a different tower state that, absolutely they were gonna not be able to refinance their home or sell their home. Like a regular buyer that wanted to get financing wasn't gonna be able to get it with that drop zone. So that's just something to consider.
Thank you for the presentation, and it kind of aligns with what I had said in email yesterday, kind of asking about what our ability is to regulate this sort of utility relative to state law. Just for the listening audience, Cleveland had passed legislation I know when it comes specifically to small cells, and basically was preempted by the state. So in many ways, we're required under the PCO to issue permits. So I think that sort of aligns with Ms. Leonard's comments. I guess the question that I have for planning, and this is more longer term, but to your point, Shannon, it's difficult for people to obtain a mortgage within the drop zone. So some of the research that I've done, so there's kind of a double-edged sword where we don't want these tall facilities, but by precluding the tall facilities, do we increase the number of what are called the small cells? And when they started popping up, and I have a map that I'll show you all, but no one's gonna see it online, like the density of small cells, this is from 2020, just popping up on people's tree lawns, people have argued has been because in the absence of a high facility, you need more lower facilities. So there's kind of I guess the research necessary is where's the balancing act? Are we affecting more people in a negative way by having more low facilities and the preference could be to have higher facilities because it affects fewer people negatively. So there's kind of there's a catch-22 that I just want to bring up because I know I was getting a lot of complaints from people coming home saying, why is there now this 5G tower in my tree lawn? And I'd be pretty upset too. So just something for us to kind of think through. Obviously, we all want good service. I think if you look at the map, it's very clear that the telecom companies are targeting, especially areas near interstates. So how can we help kind of marry locations with the needs of utility companies? So
I guess I'm confused. It doesn't take much to confuse me.
I have a question, just before, is it a question, because we're gonna take public comment and I wanna talk about it. So is it a technical question?
So I apologize for going.
Yes, me too, because we do
All right.
have to take public
Go
comment.
ahead.
But is it, do you want to ask a question about it technically before we start?
No, go ahead.
Okay, so before the commission actually discusses this matter, this is a public hearing. And we will first take comment from proponents, so those in favor of the zoning change. If you are here or online, just raise your hand or let us know that you'd like to speak in favor of this matter. And please state your name and address and how you're related to the project. Yes.
Do you want me to stand up?
Yes,
Does
please.
that help?
That would be helpful.
Everyone, my name is David Coppage. I'm an attorney with the McCarthy Levin Crystal Lipton Law Firm here in Cleveland. And I represent the American Tower Corporation, which manages and operates the tower that is the subject of this proceeding. I also have with me today John Kovich, who is a radio frequency engineer at AT&T. And John presented and prepared the radio frequency maps that I submitted yesterday in my email to Shannon. Those maps, I hope, explain why the equipment that's currently located at the Metro General facility have to be co-located to this tower that we're discussing today. And part of the equipment is also being co-located to another tower. So basically, the process here is we're losing a tower on Metro General facility. We're spreading it out to two other towers. And if you compare the 5 different maps that we've submitted, you'll see that the co-location resolves the loss of frequency that the current location has. John Kovich will be better able to explain what we're doing and why we're doing it and how these radio frequency maps interact with this process. I also have Tristan Marshall, who is the project manager at American Tower Corporation. He's on the line with us today, as is Elizabeth Dietrich, a network building consulting expert for ATC, American Tower Corporation, and AT&T. So collectively, I hope that if there's any questions that anyone here has, we have sufficient technical background to answer those questions. And as Shannon indicated, it would be our position that the city of Cleveland ordinances are going to be preempted by 6409 of the Spectrum Act. We think we've complied with all of the provisions of the act. Excuse me. And I also want to point out that initially, when we submitted this application, I think it was in December of 2022, we expanded the compound in order to address questions and concerns that the city had. We put everything, all of the equipment back inside the compound so as to comply with the existing conditions, comply with the prior approval, and have everything in the same footprint, so to speak. So we're not expanding the compound. I would submit that the revised construction drawings show that there will be only an additional 20 feet added to the existing height, which is within 6409 process. There are no more than 4 equipment cabinets. We're within 6409. There's the revised construction drawings and the application are within the parameters of the existing conditions, so we've met that as well. And one last comment I would have is the concealment. This isn't a facility that had concealment elements, so the design doesn't destroy any concealment elements, because it was a facility that never had concealment elements, and that was prior to the enactment of the city code. With that, I turn this over to anyone who has questions, and as I said, Mr. Kovich, Ms. Dietrich, and Mr. Marshall are here to answer questions. If I can answer any questions, I'm happy to do so as well.
Thank you. Anyone else here to speak in favor of this matter?
I have something for the record, just to state. We received an email from Donna Gregonis on behalf of Tremont West Community Development Corporation. While they're not opposed to the telecommunication tower, their request is that they are good neighbors by considering the fencing, landscaping, and maintenance of the property.
Thank you. Anybody now opposed to the zoning change? You can just, if you're online, raise your hand, or if you have a question, if you're a nearby property owner, if you could raise your hand. Okay, I don't see anyone. So now we will close the public portion of the meeting, and for commission members, any comments or discussion,
Yeah.
Commissioner?
I'm just trying to understand this logistically and legally, not an attorney, not a zoning person. This tower exists,
It does.
and
It's currently 130.
this, are they rebuilding this tower, or are they modifying this tower?
They're modifying, so they're extending it 20 feet. They were adding additional cabinets initially. And pictures that you see in that packet right here show what is going on at the base of this. And they have to meet 4 requirements. And initially, when they submitted that application with the expansion of the compound, our law department and our chief zoning administrator did not feel as though they had met the Spectrum Act requirements. On March 8th, they submitted a new application, or a modified application that removed those cabinets, that made them now meet that Spectrum Act. So part of that Spectrum Act is, there's a slide here, I think, this is the slide here, basically, that talks about the requirements, and essentially, if they're not going more than 20% in height, and they're not making any modifications as it relates to the concealment and aesthetics, based on federal law, the cities have to kind of expedite their application, and we have to approve it. Our law department stated that because they don't have any conditional uses on record we now have that section in our zoning code, which is chapter 354. We need to bring them in compliance. And so since we already sent out notices to the residences, Actually, this is the third time we've sent out notices because they were previously scheduled twice and then we got here. So the law department just wanted the process to go through, the neighborhood to be heard if they would like to be heard, as well as the applicant to come in compliance with the conditional uses. And so ultimately, we're here today.
A couple more questions. So this particular tower currently is a non-conforming use,
That's correct.
regardless of the request.
That's correct.
Okay, got that. Now, so what I think I heard you tell me is they're allowed to do this by right, provided they fall within the Spectrum Act,
That's correct.
correct? Okay, I just wanted to be clear. Thank you.
I have a particular question. So on the concealment issue, is the Spectrum Act in conflict with our local desire to have more landscaping and greening?
Only for expansions that meet those core requirements. So had they chosen to keep those cabinets at the base, you all could have required landscaping, and I was prepared to come here today to ask for you all to ask for
Yes, where
landscaping
I'm going.
and screening.
So to the applicant, I have a question. Would you be open to working with staff if we made a motion that, would you be open to working directly with the staff, not having to come back here, to do a little bit of enhancement to this from a landscaping neighbor, good neighbor point of view?
If we can have the permit approved, and I just confirmed this moments ago, we can put the screening into the fence, to the fencing. Green
Right.
screening that would,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
go
Okay.
through the entire perimeter. So we're able to work with the staff to do
Okay.
the screening. Landscaping is, we're not in the landscape business.
And would you and the only one that I truly care about here would be if you screen this, is just on the street frontage side. There's obviously a gate where you can't do it, but it would be nice right in front of the cabinet that faces the street, just to do some low shrubs. I'm not talking about just some, like a box shrubs there. It would, if you did those two things, this would actually be an enhancement. And, I'm just talking about a box shrubs, right? Would
Yeah,
you be open to
I don't know if I can do the problem with the landscaping is you gotta continuously maintain it, you gotta go out and water, you gotta.
that?
It's,
You got grass, who
I
mows
can
the grass?
you know what, I don't know.
Okay,
That's a good
so
question.
someone mows the grass, there's
I don't-
grass, so
I don't
someone
know.
mows the grass.
We can certainly put the screening up. I have the ability to offer that today.
Um,
And the screening would be, entire perimeter.
Yes.
I think
Can
that-
you ask about the box shrubs? I mean, they're extremely,
I've
they're
asked,
less maintenance than grass.
I've asked about shrubs and landscaping, and that's just not, I can't offer that today. But I can, because the screening is there, it's permanent, right? You don't have to maintain it, you don't have to water it. And I understand cutting the grass is one thing, but I can certainly go ahead and say yes.
Well,
to this.
to Shannon, do we have the right to add that as a condition?
Well, I just like, if you don't mind, Madam Chair, just because what bothers me is the fact that property is compromised. And I know there's nothing we can do about it because it's there already. But, Madam Chair, to the applicant, at the end of the day, if you're causing a negative impact on a community, you're causing some stress on a community, coming to some compromise to do something like that, I think is small, considering this guy next door, the guy across the street, may not be able to refinance his house and replace his roof. So it's a social thing, and I know you're not here for that, but I think as a utility and as a partner in this city, because I consider utility partners, we should do better. And lastly, and most importantly, I think if any of these towers are constructed, it needs to be very intentional where they go. I know we can't do anything about the towers currently here, but we have to manage expectations. So I just wanted to have my say. Thank you.
And if I may, obviously using existing equipment and co-locating to existing towers is much more preferable than building, to your point, Mr. Freeman, building new towers. And if you look at these frequency maps, this is the best solution to provide the services that these utilities provide to everyone in the city. This is one of the busiest locations in Northeast Ohio, I've been told. And so having the co-location to these two towers, and only one is under consideration today, just to be clear, but this is the solution as opposed to co-locating is policy solution as opposed to.
Where's the other one? On the
If you look at the maps, and give me a second, please.
Because clearly we're gonna see you again. So this is a partnership. I'm just gonna point that out. Well, that's okay. We don't need to know because
No,
we'll see you
it's
again.
a good question. If you look at the existing coverage map, which is the first one, is it okay if I just hold this up to you here? 00069 is the tower that's under consideration. And then it's 9186, which is also co-located too. So if you see, this is what would happen coverage-wise when we remove the Metro General facilities. This is what we get. This is what we have now. This is what we would have if we don't have the co-location. And then this is what we have when we get the co-location. So we're really replacing what we have.
Okay. Well, we'll see you again, but, so I would ask that whoever makes the motion include that, that they can work with staff on the screening, but that be part of the motion, for the fencing.
Can I have just one last comment?
Yes, oh, sorry.
Go ahead, go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, let me just submit. I tried to print color copies. I can certainly give Shannon color copies, but this is the screening we're referring to.
Yeah.
This is the right green screening. I'll just go ahead and read.
Yeah, we know it
I
well.
was just taking it in 60 seconds.
Sadly, we do.
We know it well. All right, Councilman.
Yes, just out of curiosity, this map that we're looking at, this color one was provided by you, right?
Yes.
By staff. Are maps like this publicly available?
My understanding is this was a map that Mr. Kovich put together. He's the AT&T radio frequency engineer. So no, I don't believe that's publicly available. That's its work product that
It
he
is now.
Well, it is
submitted.
now.
Yeah.
Well, and Director, my reason for asking is, and I don't want to be found guilty of conflating this and the small cells, because they are different things, and I'm not an industry expert to know kind of the nuance between the two. However, my spidey sense tells me that the telecom companies value service, especially near interstates. And when I mapped those small cell facilities, even within my ward, there were double the number north of Lorraine Avenue, closer to I-90 than south of Lorraine, and very few in Ward 2 where there's no interstates. And I bring that up because if you look at this map and you kind of see a convergence of interstates, I would be interested if the data are available where facilities like this exist throughout Cuyahoga County, because it seems that, again, this is just my hunch, we have a convergence of interstates and the telecom companies have no misgivings about plopping down severe infrastructure in communities like ours, in lower income communities, in non-white communities. And I just have a feeling that if this were happening at scale in Bay Village, state law would not be what state law currently is. But this is something that affects our community, it seems more so than others. And I think that it would be useful for us to kind of get a wrap around that larger issue, because I guess my frustration is if my hypothesis that it's really about ensuring service along interstate corridors, there's a lot of green space in ODOT right away. And instead of doing that, we're using plots next to people's houses and tree lines.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, commission members?
Madam Chair, if I could make a procedural point, we cannot put a condition on this particular zoning matter for the screening, it has to be a recommendation.
Okay,
But we have on the record an agreement to do it. So we'll just point that out. We're on the record here, so we've heard that they will be doing. So
We should include it in the motion as a recommendation. So that is what will be filed.
Madam Chair.
go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Diane.
I'm gonna make a motion.
Go ahead.
All
You're the master motion maker.
Madam Chair, I would like to make a motion to approve the application from Northern Ohio Cellular to enlarge an existing legal non-conforming 130-foot high telecommunications tower by extending it 20 feet, co-locate antennas, and 20 kilowatt diesel generator inside the compound in a two-family residential district with a maximum height requirement of 35 feet. And recommend that the company install green screening around the perimeter fence.
Second.
a motion and a second. You want to call the roll?
Downey,
Yes.
Hoover,
Yes.
Bird,
Yes.
Craig Scott,
Yes.
Yes.
Welcome, Commissioner Member McCray Scott. Good to have you. A motion carries. Okay, thank you very much, and we look forward to seeing you again. I'm sure that
Not
will
really.
No, soon. All right, we're going on to design review. First one is Downtown Flats Design Review. DF 2022-070. This is Mazzella Lifting Technologies. This is a signage expansion. It's seeking final approval. And you can see the committee recommendations on the screen. Anyone who's here to speak to this, I'll need to swear you in. Well, I don't need to swear you in. But any representatives? Pat, are you online?
Yes, I am.
Is there anyone else with you or just you?
It's just me.
Okay. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth as you shall answer to the penalty of perjury?
Yes.
Okay. First, I think we're going to have staff with Shannon, and then we'll have you talk as well, Pat. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning again.
So this is Mazzella Lifting Technologies. Next slide, please. Shannon Leonard, Chief Zoning Planner, City Planning Commission. This is coming before you. It is a sign case that needs some variances. This is really just to permit business identification signage for identification and branding. Next slide, please. Why are we here? So you are able to make the code less strict or more strict based on design compatibility, approved design guidelines, and minimum variation necessary to ensure design compatibility. Next slide, please. So these signs have already been installed. They were painted on the building. Prior to getting a permit, there was some confusion between the contractor and the owner in terms of what required a permit, I believe. And so they have gone through design review. They've gone to the local committee, I believe 2 or 3 times now. And so these painted wall signs, you'll notice A is the Mazzella, the large red, that's 88.44 square feet. B is the ITI partner, that is one of their partner businesses that has equipment within this building. It's 13.3 square feet. And then they have the wall address 1948, that's C, that's 27.16. They do have a Carter address. There is no pedestrian entrance on Carter. It's actually on the driveway next to their building, which you'll see in the next slide. It's immediately adjacent to Brewdog. Essentially, they're permitted 130 square feet of business identification signage along Carter Road. They are proposing 128.9 square feet, so there's no variance needed. You do not see it, but where it says training, services, industrial supplies, that's considered an informational sign. In other words, if you were to take Mazzella away, that would just be standard information. Informational signs are only allowed to be 4 square feet. In their last rendition, they were proposing 64, so they would need a 60.79 square foot variance here. Next slide, please. So at the last, this is just another summation. At the last design review, there was conversations, mixed feelings about that informational sign. And so they had asked the owner to make it a little bit smaller, to be a little bit more in compliance. So right now, the top picture that you see is what's currently painted on the building. At the last one, they're proposing to actually make that smaller, but that would require them to unpaint the sign and repaint the sign. Us staff believe that was a little excessive, being that they had already been to 2 or 3 design review meetings, and it's time for them to kind of move on in the due process. Next slide, please. And so they are also permitted secondary frontage signage, 50%. Next slide, please. And so their secondary frontage, which is actually where their parking lot is and their main pedestrian entrance, is their driveway. They're proposing the Manzella sign. They're proposing 41.95 square feet, which is actually less than 50% of the total facade. And then along the riverfront, you're also allowed, if you have a riverfront property, you're allowed that secondary signage. This business is specifically related to rigging and things of that nature that they attract some of their clients from the river. And so they're proposing this other sign that this is the only one that has not been installed. The painted wall sign has been, but the sign in the rear has not. And they are proposing 54 square feet. Again, it's less than 50% of the total facade. But because of these 2 secondary frontage signs, they need 30.95 square foot variance. Next slide, please. And so basically you're just considering for the informational sign, is what they originally needed of 60 square feet okay? Or do you want them to repaint the sign and have a 40 square foot variance? And then is the secondary frontage sign, they need that 30.95 square foot variance. Is it better suited to design of the subject property? Does it meet our design guidelines? And is it minimum variation necessary to approve, to meet their goals of identification for their facility? This facility is also a showroom, but it's also a training facility. And Mr. Driscoll can talk to you more about that. Also, Flats Ford has sent in their support for the signage at the previous meeting. So not the one on the second picture of Manzella, but the one that is currently existing. They did originally have every single window covered with windows clings. They have removed that. And then they had also proposed an off-premise directional sign, and they've removed that as well.
Thank you. So to the applicant, Pat, do you want to add anything to this?
I think everything was pretty well covered. I think the big thing was the informational sign, you know, with the removal of assemblies that takes away 20 square feet from the frontage. For us, that was one of the words on there that didn't necessarily need to be there, and that would be, you know, we'd still get the message across. Related to training services, industrial supplies, and lifting and rigging, those are very unique things to this building that we don't offer at our Cleveland facility. So that's why we feel it was important to have those items on the front of the building, is to let people know that ITI is the training, our training business that will be operating out of that building. We have a showroom, and that relates to the industrial supplies, and then we offer some other services, lifting and rigging related. So with the removal of that word, it still would make sense and let people know that we offer these things out of the building. Aside from that, I think everything else was well covered. So.
Okay, thank you. Commission members,
Thank
any comments, questions?
Yeah, Madam Chair, to Shannon, I see under the information under this project that there's no vote taken.
A no vote, no vote.
Yeah, because at the last design review meeting,
Nope.
there was a lot of things happening, and there was, half the committee was, for the signage because they made all these changes, and the other half of the committee, or a few people, wanted them to withdraw and go back to the drawing board and resize their Mozilla signage and the informational sign altogether. So they asked them initially to withdraw, I think, or to postpone it. But because as a
Maybe you should.
generally policy for planning commission is after so many meetings of local, they move forward. And so staff decided, or the director, I believe, asked for us to go ahead and allow this process to play out and for their due process.
So they didn't vote.
They did not.
Okay, I misunderstood that.
Yeah, they had postponed it.
I did as well. I thought there was a no vote.
There was no vote. That's how you remember.
Yeah, but we needed to move them forward for the process.
Okay. Commission members? Any discussion?
Can we just go back to the slide that shows the two specific, because I'm confused of if
They
is
look the
Mazzella
same.
asking for the 60-foot existing or the 44?
They look the same to me.
So that's what's existing, if you go back 60 square foot variance. Now, they did submit a new drawing saying that they could take off that last word, I believe, which would only mean a 40 square foot variance. And so if you go to, I think, 2 slides in, more, Xavier. Keep going. And the BrewDog context is to give you some context. Oh, go the other way into my slides. Going right here, yep. So you can go to the previous slide.
Oh,
Yeah, right here. So this is the difference, essentially. So what's painted is on the top sign, or that informational sign. And on the bottom is what they had submitted since the last meeting at design review to this point. And so I wanted to be able to show both of you, show you that they're gonna need a variance regardless, but leave it up to this commission as to whether you think the signage that's currently painted is okay, or they should remove that last word.
Yeah. Okay. Commission member?
Madam Chair, I'll make. Oh,
I'll just say,
Go
You had a
ahead.
question.
I'm
Sorry.
I personally I'm not personally opposed to the front facade signage as it stands. I think especially with the BrewDog sign is very large, it's there's precedent kind of for larger signage in the area, so like this is, to me, like the existence of a word is essentially what's causing it, so it's not giving me any, causing me any grief, but I don't know if that's just my personal opinion.
Madam Chair, I would like to make a motion to grant final approval for the Mazzella Lifting Technologies signage expansion at 1948 Carter Road as it exists.
As it exists. And the second sign as well.
And the second sign as well.
I will second.
We have a motion and a second. Any other comment? Call the roll.
Now,
Yes.
Rupert,
Yes.
Curry,
Yes.
McBride Scott,
Yes.
Swett.
Yes.
Cooper is going to chair the meeting, and I'll.
Introduce the case, I have just a quick intro.
Sure, we're here for, the Downtown Flats Committee, docket number 2023-04, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame expansion, seeking conceptual approval. Do we have, I would like to swear these guys in, then I'll turn it over to you, Director. Who's here to present this project?
Hi, it's Greg Harris, the President CEO of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I'll be doing an introduction, and then we have a few other presenters that I'm happy to introduce now, or they could turn on their cameras to
You
be
can
sworn.
introduce by name, then I'll swear you all in.
Hi, Mark Faulkner.
Okay, super.
Hi, everybody.
Lisa Switkin.
That's it. Mark Faulkner with PAL. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, do you solemnly swear that you're telling the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth for the matter and hearing under the penalty of perjury? Yes, nod your head,
Yes.
wave, scream.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, I'm gonna turn this over to Director Wong to
Yes.
provide staff comments.
Great, thank you. So we are very excited to have the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame here with us today. Thank you to Mr. Greg Harris and the architecture team We are excited about the project. This is a major, major institution in the city of Cleveland. We have met with them once to preview the project, and they have kept us apprised of their timelines. Because this is a major project, they will be coming before the body for conceptual, schematic, and final design review. And my only comment prior to the start of the session is to the applicant through the chair, if you could address parts of your presentation towards the lakefronts and how this ties in with the lakefront work, with particular, comment on the visual and sight lines to the lake, as well as pedestrian access around the southern edge of the building, since the lakefront is such a big focus of the city of Cleveland. So if you wouldn't mind focusing on that during your presentation, that would be extremely helpful.
Thank you, Director. I'm going to turn it over for introductions here, and I believe Mr. Harris is going to start.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Huang, and thank you to the whole city of Cleveland Planning Commission members, Chairperson Curry, although not in the room. We're very grateful for this opportunity to present this look at our exciting plans for the expansion of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and also, they truly bringing forward a lot of the promise of the lakefront that we launched 30 years ago with the construction of a few spaces there. As you know, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is an iconic global brand, and it's uniquely Cleveland's. We draw visitors from all over the world. 80% of them from outside the region. They've had a massive economic impact on our city. And in addition to that, we've been an important educational institution for our city and an anchor to a travel and tourism economy that's very important to Cleveland. Just to give you the highlights, in the last 28 years, we've had 14 million visitors. We've generated an economic impact of $2.5 billion. Close to 1,800 jobs to service our visitors.
Mr. Harris, I think you should turn your camera off.
Coming. Okay. Turn it off. You got it. Thank you for that direction.
Wait. Sorry?
Is that better? The other balance of that is that we're free every day to all city residents. And last year we hosted 170 live programs. They're usually outdoors and they're usually free. We're now 30 years old, and it's time for us to expand and offer more experiences for visitors as well as the community. And this new project will feature extensive new public spaces, non-ticketed public spaces, with new opportunities to enjoy the lakefront, both indoors and outside. And it's going to provide robust public access to the lakefront for truly the first time. We're already talking to the Metro Parks about coordination, and of course our partners like the Great Lakes Science Center on how to maximize this. This project is going to get done. This is not just a dream. We have an amazing group working on it. We've raised considerable funding to do it. And I want to introduce some of the participants that are here with us today that are going to help get this project done, and then you'll be hearing from a few of them. I have Tim Oftermatt with us, who is our lead on the project for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Sean O'Malley and Rob Weil from the museum as well. Mark Faulkner of POW, who you'll hear from. Eli Cappy of POW as well. Lisa Switkin of James Corner Field Operations, our landscape architect. You'll hear from Lisa and her team. John Michael Lemon of Osborne. Ellis Katz, our owner's rep with PMC. And noting Robert Klahn from Robert Madison Associates, the firm that worked on this building 28 years ago when it first opened, a Cleveland-based architecture firm that's going to be our architect of record. Wonderful collaborators. With that, it's an honor for me to introduce Mark Faulkner of Practice for Architecture and Urbanism. That's the design architect on this project, to walk you through, and then we'll hear from Lisa Switkin with James Corner Field Operations on the landscaping. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Greg. I'm Mark Faulkner. I'm an associate principal at POW, Practice for Architecture and Urbanism. And as Greg mentioned, we have a great team. A lot of them here. I'm one member of the team. I'm the project architect. I've been on the project since the competition. a number of years ago, and it's an honor to be here today to walk you through the project and where we are with everything. I'm going to walk you through the overall concept, some of the site photos, the placement of the building, and then I'll hand it off to Lisa to talk more about the landscape and how it integrates with the lake and also the street. We can stay on this page for a second just to talk about the program a little bit. You know, what's the reason for this expansion? We're expanding for a number of reasons. We're looking to produce a new lobby for better connections to the street, better connections to the lake. We're looking to relocate our office space, which really alleviates a lot of the congestion in the existing Pay building, better and larger exhibit space. We are also providing a multi-purpose space for concerts and other uses. And in general, just going back to that lobby, that public space that I want to talk a little more about. This is an iconic building. It's the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame by I.M. Pei. He's a hero of ours at POW. We respect him greatly. It's interesting, I.M. Pei had similar challenges throughout his career of expanding on, iconic museums like the National Gallery in Washington, D.C., the Louvre in Paris. For the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, we wanted to respect it, but we also wanted to have our own presence and our own attitude. There's a bit of a both and type of architecture that we were interested in. We neither wanted to be competitive, and we didn't want to be a silent partner either. We wanted to have a presence. There's some diagrams here that I'll talk through a little bit later, and maybe it's good to go through the next 5 or 6 slides where we have a couple site conditions just to make sure everybody's clear on where we're siting the building and its broader relationships. We all know where it's located on the lakefront, but it's good to point out how integral the location and the siting is relative to the broader lakefront and that expansion. This is really a key location to making that whole lakefront active and used. If you go to the next slide, I believe you can see a site plan of it. Now, our building, our expansion, we're locating it in that space between the Great Lakes Science Center and the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, that grass, that array of trees. That's the primary siting of our expansion. You can go to the next slide. Here you can see a bit of the aerial. And I think that there's a couple things to point out here just to keep in mind is, one, that existing entry to the I.M. Pei building, it's set back from the street. It was always a distance from Erie side and 9th Street. You can see that array of trees and that grass. There was never an accessible connection from Erie side down to the Harbor Walk. And those are that access point and also that connection are things that we're trying to improve greatly. You could go to the next slide, that'd be great. And then there's that view, that existing view from Cleveland itself, very important. And we were very conscious of it during our design, trying to keep the building low, trying to preserve some of that space that opens up to the lake. And then the next slide. And then also looking back, an amazing view of the city. How does our building interact with Pei? How does it preserve the views back to the Cleveland? Also things that we wanted to keep in mind. And then I think the next 2 slides are just more detailed below it. Yeah. So here's just a zoom in on that space. Again, we're really siting the building between that space between the Great Lakes Science Center and the I.M. Pei building in that grass area and that array of trees. And then the next slide. And then this is that property line, just really showing you a little more clearly the relationships to the street, to the promenade, in terms of the areas. And now if you could go to the next slide, I want to talk a little bit about the concept and how we approach this. So when we first started and we worked on the competition with JCFO, this is something that JCFO really brought to the table that was a very important generator in terms of how we thought about the landscape, but also how we thought about the building. And that was that there's a public plaza related to the city, related to the streets. And that's that one that says city, facing Erie side and facing 9th Street. But then there's another key public zone that faces the lake at a lower level, faces the lake promenade. So we always wanted to keep these 2 relationships in mind, and when we work towards these, activate these, improve connection and use of both of these spaces. when we started to mass the building and go through programming and sizing, by thinking about this led us to the next diagram. And if you could go to the next page, I'd be appreciative. It's how do you connect these three key parts? How do you connect the building back to the city? How do you have a better front door? How do you connect the building to the lake and provide a porch off that promenade and a better connection point to the lake? But then from a functional aspect is how do you connect back to the pyramid itself? How do you ensure that functionality, that user, that circulation path back to the existing pyramid? These 3 points became a really key driver for functionality, programming, wayfinding inside, that relationship to the street, that relationship to the lake. And then I think if you go to the next slide, this is our current site plan of the building, showing how that really has manifested itself. And you can just see that relationship to the street. We're right there. You don't have to walk off the plaza searching for the front porch right off of the Erie side. That lake connector park between Erie side and our expansion allows people to come down there much more gracefully and gradually. And Lisa will talk about that more. And then we can see on the lake promenade how we're opening up the harbor walk to really invite people into the building and also give a little more space for activity in that vicinity. And then what does this mean on the inside of the building? I think if you go to the next slide, that will start to explain that. That it's not only about our public engagements, not only about the outside of the relationship to the edges of the streets. We wanted to bring people into the building as well. So this main entry space, this whole area between the plaza all the way down to the lake, this is unticketed area, unticketed space. The public can come inside the building. They can grab a cup of coffee. They can go see the exhibit, or they just want to hang out. It's an unticketed place for the public. And it's also a place that we're looking to provide accessible means of circulation to get down from the plaza level to the lake. There's about a 20-foot grade change between the two. It's a place where you can still experience on the interior condition, you can experience that existing IMP building on the inside. You know, we're excited about developing in that further and really showing you some views as we go through the next meetings with you all. And then if you go to the next slide, this is starting to see a hardline version of how this is all laying out. And again, you can see that existing pay building exists in the same way it does now, but on the inside of our expansion. And now we have a way to get down from the plaza, from the street to the lake on the interior of the building and also on the exterior of the building. And both of those are very important just from a public engagement aspect and bringing people in, making this building part of the public realm. Next slide, please. And here's an early section just really showing how we're trying to work that out. This is that public space, and you can see the IMP building coming in the distance through that. And next slide. These are technical drawings. You know, they don't have the materiality. Materiality is so key to what we do in architecture. But one thing I just want to point out is that we're really conscious of maintaining the integrity of the existing IMP building. And here's that relationship between the two. We're both reverent, we're respecting pay, but we're also irreverent. There's a bit of attitude and you know, that goes to the genre of rock and roll. There's a clash between the two, and they really work together to form this figure eight, to form this connection that works well from a functional aspect. You can connect between the two, between the expansion and the existing at plaza level. You can connect between the expansion and existing at lake level. And this is that view. This is a kind of a view of elevation from the plaza looking at the expansion. You know, one other thing that you'll notice is we're picking up on some of the forms that Pay started. You can see we have that drum on the left, that's sort of our new expansion. Well, those forms came and were pulled from what Pay was doing himself on the existing Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And then the next slide. This is a view from the Great Lakes Science Center. This is that elevation. I mentioned before, we're really conscious of the height of this building. We're trying to keep it lower. That roof slopes with the landscape as it goes down to the lake. And it's relatively low, and especially when you think about those views from further back in the city, that height relationship. You know, this is a lower building, it has a similar scale, but it really flows with the landscape. And then the next slide. and that view looking back. So this is that elevation, again, technical in nature, and we're excited to show you materials next time. But there's this nice figure eight between the two. They start to relate and tie into each other. And you can also see that big glass facade on the rear of the building and expansion on the right. That is open to the harbor walk. So people coming in off that harbor walk can, there's that access point there. We're still talking about security and figuring that all out. But there's a huge hello, a huge welcome lake level. It's really engaging the lake level and the promenade in the way that the existing building does not do right now. And then I think if you go to the next one, you can see an aerial that we're starting to look at, showing that relationship, going back to that triangle I talked about, connecting to the city, connecting to the lake. So I'm gonna turn it over to Lisa at JCSO now. She's gonna walk you through the landscape and what we're doing there. But thank you. Looking forward to questions.
Hey, everybody. Hope you can hear me. I know there was a little echo there at the end. We're thrilled to be here to represent the landscape architects working on the project closely with POW and other team members. So we've been calling the area between the Great Lakes Science Center and the new expansion the community park. So if I refer to that term, that's what I'm talking about. And the community park really provides an ADA accessible, really welcoming entrance to the lake, but also back to the city, because you do approach the city sometimes if you're going or you're parking and you're entering the building from that way as well. And this is really achieved through providing quite a significant reduction in slope. So we're negotiating an existing 18-foot grade change from Erie Side Avenue down to the lake. For those of you that know that space well, it's currently, there's a path with a series of steps that go down right between that alley of trees. And the meander really allows us to actually physically negotiate that grade change, but it also allows us to create a really dynamic experience and an immersive sort of walk that we believe helps to kind of dramatize actually the sense of arrival at the lake. So it kind of opens up to both the lake and, as I said too, also to the city. And then there's a series of kind of nestled programs within that. And we're using landform. And this is really done not only to balance the cut and fill, because you do need to create a hole, right, to put the building in. So we're balancing that cut and fill from the building, but it also supports native planting. We're using it to provide really innovative and educational stormwater management that we think pairs with the missions of both the Rock Hall and the Great Lakes Science Center. And then we're also kind of shaping these sheltered kind of programmatic outdoor rooms. So those help to create a kind of more buffered space in the cold winters and winds. And they also provide shade in the summer months. So we really feel like this also provides a kind of more casual and friendly and usable space that really is something different in both the atmosphere as well as the experience to the more formal spaces of the malls and downtown. You'll note in this drawing too, you can see, I mean, it's very generic, just green, but there is, the expansion building does include a proposed inaccessible extensive green roof. So that really creates a strong, positive, we think, visual presence. It is visible from many different angles. It's also performative, and it also aligns with the larger sustainability goals for the project. It is inaccessible due to structural capacity. And then on the Civic Plaza side, going back to that original diagram that Mark was referencing, like we think it really celebrates what's great about the plaza today. It's democratic, it's civic, it's flexible, it's adaptable. And, it also is a place where really the Rock Hall is committed to doing public facing and uniquely Cleveland programming. So the expansion actually helps to reframe and activate the plaza because it gives it an additional side, which was actually always Pei's intention back to some of his original drawings, which is really interesting. And it also increases ADA access because we're providing 2 ADA entries into the plaza, both on the 9th Street side as well as right at the entry. Go to the next slide. Sorry, I lingered on that one for a while. This is just a blow up of the community park and you can see the green roof. And then the next slide. just to make a note that the site planting is really inspired by native woodland. There's an idea here to use kind of a layered planting design, so it has canopy, mid-story, understory, but there's clear kind of vistas and views both to the lake as well as along the pathways. And as Greg mentioned in his opening remarks, again, just to kind of emphasize that the Rock Hall and our teams are working really closely with a lot of the regional partners, because we know that this is a part of a much bigger initiative to maximize public access to the lakefront. So that's it for me.
Thank you. Mr. Faulkner, is that the end of your presentation?
Yeah, that's the end of our presentation. Thank you so much.
Just before I turn it over to any comments to the rest of the commission, there are 5 comments made from design review. Could you address those before we move on? Are you privy to those? There you go. Thank you.
Mark, I can maybe speak to bullet point 2 and 5, the last one. Just to say, I mean, okay, hopefully, you know, we are looking at passive programming and public engagement opportunities in both the existing plaza, the Civic Plaza, continuing and enhancing those types of programs, as well as I hope came through in some of my descriptions, the kind of outdoor rooms and the potential for additional types of passive programming at the community park, as well as that expanded area along the Harbor Walkway. I think in terms of the last point, you know, this is something that we talked about a lot internally, and you know, the contrast and the kind of freedom of the landscape we think actually really pairs with the formal shapes and geometries that are so rigid and so specific, the triangles, the circles of the buildings. It also is a product of the physical kind of negotiation that needs to happen to create all of those kind of ADA accesses. So of course, I think in schematic design and moving forward, it's something that will continue to sort of align between the two, but we actually feel like doing more geometry in the landscape would feel kind of forced and actually awkward considering the strength of it already in the buildings.
Thank you.
Thank you. I can address a little bit, and I apologize, I'm having audio trouble. This is Greg Harris again. The signage and wayfinding to the lakefront and surrounding downtown assets. Yeah, our desire isn't to be an island. It's to be really connected, both to our neighbors, but also to downtown. And the Rock Box project we did a couple of years ago, wasn't it? An effort to connect better with downtown, to traverse the, you know, the freeway and other things that are there, and really have a tangible connection between the two. So proper signage, proper connectivity is super important. We don't want to build this treasure and not have it used, and we want people that are using this treasure to know more about what's around them. The other things that I can touch on, and maybe Mark could as well, but the entryway, the current entryway, you might recall, is completely across the plaza. And it is a little intuitive because it's the center of the pyramid. We're actually shifting that to be very much right at the road as a drop-off point, which with our Cleveland winters is much appreciated. And it'll be far better for that type of access and drop-off. But we are going to need to make sure that people know where to go, where to enter, and how to best use that. Many of our visitors come from filling the hotels in downtown Cleveland and walking over, and then others come, those that park at the Great Lakes Science Center lot and come across the lakefront. That will be far better and far clearer than it is now, and far more accessible. And then for those that are dropped off in front, they'll be far closer to the entryway. But it was taken in good as a good comment, because it does shift from the center of the pyramid up to the road, and we'll be sure of that.
Yeah,
Mark, anything?
Yeah, to expand on the entry comment, you know, I think we're marking the entry with both formal moves. For one, you know, this big drum towards that we're creating at the edge of Erie side with a canopy to really protect from people from the elements as they come off Erie side. It's something that when we come back to you next time and show you some perspective views from ground level, you can really understand how clearly defined that is as an entry point now. You always need to supplement that with some signage, but as we've been developing it and thinking about it, we've been really conscious to make sure that that entry point feels natural and feels direct and easy. In terms of bullet point 3, the intersection of the roof and those elements, that's really a huge focus of what we're doing to make sure that they really connect gracefully. It's we're honored to work with Lyra. They were actually the original structural engineers of the IMP building. And we've been working together really closely with them to make sure that that intersection between new and existing is really crisp. I can't get into all the details yet because we're still working through the details, but that connection needs to be of the utmost clarity and simplicity. Because as I mentioned, we want to express the existing building on the interior of our building. We want it to read from the exterior. It's a bit of a challenge, but we have the perfect team to make that happen.
Thank you. Thank you.
I think the last one, just to build on, is the program and engagement. I think Greg mentioned this, but we designed the whole building with that in mind. Right now, the building doesn't connect too well to the existing plaza. The way we're siting these walls really allows people to open up the interior to the plaza at the on the Erie Side Road level, but also at the Harbor Walk level as well. So we expect much more engagement between the expansion and these outdoor spaces. Thanks.
Thank you. I appreciate your elaborating.
I think Tim Ofterman at one
Yes,
point.
I saw that.
Oh, okay.
No, Mr. Offermat, I see you had your hand raised.
I did. I wanted to make sure the points that you've raised in these comments did get addressed, and I think between Greg and Mark and Lisa, they have. I did want to reiterate, though, one of Greg's introductory comments as it relates to passive programming and public engagement. We are in the early stages of working with some key community partners because we're looking to really recruit other critical members of the community to help us program these very important public spaces. As you may know or recall, Lisa Switkin's firm, JCFO, was integral in the design of Public Square. So we're very focused on creating more integrated public spaces on the lakefront in particular. So this is a primary focus of ours. And as we proceed with the commission going forward, we'll be able to share some more once we're able to accomplish some of this work. We'll be able to share some of these community partnerships that we're already working on.
Thank you, Mr. Offermat. Any other questions from the audience? Comments? Commission?
To the chair, I'd like to make a motion to approve the conceptual design of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame expansion and ask the design and management team to consider the comments from design review. And I believe I have to read them as part of the motion, correct?
I mean, if you'd like, and if I could just jump in, I think some of the comments from design review will be addressed in future schematic and final, but we can recommend that or ask them to consider them for future presentations.
Well, then why don't I leave my motion to ask the team to consider them and to update us on that in their future presentations.
I will second, but I do have a quick question for the director before we vote. How does, I know, so the proposed idea of a land bridge is still kind of a little slightly west of where it, like the Rock Hall's not due north of the malls, but how are we, if there's going to be a building expand further westward and a concept to bring a land bridge over railroad tracks, have we had conversations about how those kind of come together? It almost feels premature, but to talk about it late now, but if planning commission does approve on that, well, that will sort of guide that project. So I wouldn't want to foreclose on that project because of something that we missed in design review for this project, when really there's a possibility to marry the two well.
To the councilman, thanks for your comments. Thankfully, JCFO is involved in the lakefront planning, and it is not yet decided where the land bridge will be placed or land, so to speak. And so, at this time, I think because this project is moving in its own timeline, I think it's an input to then the planning effort around the land bridge, if that makes sense.
Okay.
But I certainly think we ought to consider these things as we are doing the master planning process.
Sure.
I did see Tim Offermatt had raised his hand. I don't know if he had any additional comments.
Director, I'll just echo, pardon me, I'll just echo your comments with JCFO's involvement at the center of the master planning process for the city. I will also say that at the city's direction, many community partners, including the Rock Hall, have been brought into the conversation. And both Greg Harris, our CEO, and myself are involved in many of the discussions, many of the committees, and frankly, the primary focus of the entire effort is to integrate the assets on the lakefront to the central business district via the land bridge and other infrastructure improvements that might take place. So we are taking into consideration potential future improvements between the central business district and the lakefront, and they're part of our planning process.
No, I'll leave it there. I'm glad to hear that they're keying into each other. The only other thought is, like even with kind of what was shown as like a green roof, like theoretically they could segue from one into the other, but like I also would want to not do so in a way that is undercutting the architecture that we're trying to, like that you are, what is iconic infrastructure or architecture, what will, become enhanced iconic architecture, and you don't want it to also get lost in that mix. So there's a lot of moving parts, and then we'll continue to be engaged on it, I guess.
I would like to make a comment. I'd like to commend the design team for the intervention you've made between the two venues, because I think it's going to create a better passive space, both on the plaza side as well as the green area that you referred to. Because I think the failure for a lot of public spaces is, we think it's going to be programmed all the time, and it's not. And the success of spaces is really how well they perform as passive spaces, in my opinion. And hopefully, as we navigate this, maybe there's like some pop-up things that could happen to test some assumptions, to see what we might include in those plazas or in the other green space. So I applaud you guys. So we had a motion. We have a second?
Yes, I could.
Okay. Michael, roll please.
Downey,
Yes.
Luker,
Yes.
Gray Scott,
Yes.
Right.
Yes. All right. Thank you. Good luck. Could you let Lillian know she can come back to?
Thank you very much.
Last.
Thank you very much.
All right,
Thank you,
take care.
Rockville team. And just for timing, we have one more presentation for mandatory referral, and we also have the informational presentation for townhouse, so just FYI.
Okay.
Want to keep flipping, so.
All right, Lily.
All good?
Yeah, Lily, I was just there, there's one more presentation for legislation, and we do have the townhouse code
Yep.
presentation, so just.
We'll go quickly then. So we have a mandatory referral. This is item number 329-2023. This is authorizing the Director of Public Works to enter into one or more amendments to the Lakefront Park lease with the Board of Commissioners of the Cleveland Metropolitan Park District to modify the boundaries of certain properties in the leased premises. And Suzanne is here. Welcome. It's been a while.
Thank you.
Good to
Yes,
see you.
thank you. Good morning. I am the Commissioner of Real Estate, Suzanne DeGennaro, and I'm here to present ordinance 329-2023, which, as you mentioned, Madam Chair, authorizes the Director of Public Works to amend the existing lease that we have with Metro Parks for the Cleveland Lakefront Reservation to add a portion of Ford Park to the lease. The portion to be added is 47.8 acre parcel, which is bounded by I-90 to the north, East 72nd to the west, Railroad to the south, and Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard to the east. And the reason for the lease amendment is that Metro Parks has negotiated with a local foundation, a grant, in the amount of approximately $8 million. And you can see the portion in red is the portion to be added to the lease. So they have negotiated for this grant funding to make improvements to this property. And one of the requirements of the grant is that we amend the lease to add this to the lease. The specific improvements that will be made will be determined based upon community engagement, which will include the city, the councilman's office, the local CDC and other stakeholders. And the park will of course remain open and free of open to the public and free of admission fees as required by the Board of Americans.
What is the term of the lease?
The lease was entered into the lease in 2013 for 99 years. So it will terminate in, I think it's 2112, with one option to extend for a 10-year period.
But it matches the, it matches with the.
Yes.
I won't be around.
Not to get a lease, conditions are changed.
Okay.
Yeah, it's hard to conceive 2112.
Okay.
Madam Chair, I move approval to authorize the Director of Public Works to enter into this expanded area for the Lakefront Parks lease.
I second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further comment? Do you want to say something?
Just, I did speak with Councilman Harrison on this, and he is supportive of this moving forward. I will say his his major expectation in that public process is maintaining this area in red as kind of a traditional neighborhood park with neighborhood amenities, ball field, basketball courts, things like that. And we're also interested in talking with Metro Parks. Is there an ability for that little sliver of land on the other side of 72nd to maybe be opened up for some other, right now I believe it's like storage and maintenance of, public use, perhaps development opportunities there. But right now, that's just, that's sort of its own standalone thing. And I know that Councilman Harrison's interested in that conversation as well. So just things that kind of plug as this legislation moves forward, passes, and then the engagement really kicks into full gear.
Okay. Thank you. Any other comments or questions?
I just want to note for the record, we do have a Metro Parks rep here just to listen
Welcome.
today. So.
Thank you. Anything you'd like to say? No? Okay, good. Okay, let's call the roll.
Yes.
Luker,
Abstain.
Yes.
Frank Scott,
Yes.
Swett,
Yes.
Fabulous. It'll be really nice to see all the plans here with cheers and everything. It's exciting. It's really exciting. So thank you. I should note, it's not this foundation. So
Yes,
not this foundation here. All right, administrative approvals, if you could just look over them quickly, they'll be on the screen, but we have them in front of us. There are 3 administrative approvals. And once you've had a second, if someone can have, make a motion for these items.
I move approval of the administrative approval items.
Second.
A motion and a second, can you call the roll?
Yes.
Hoover.
Yes.
Yes.
Chairperson Scott.
Yes.
Flood.
Yes.
What is considered
Motion
this?
carried.
Considered the second district.
Third is downtown, second.
Second is,
like
it's like,
Brooklyn.
west side of
West side,
the stations at Fulton and.
Okay, first you said West and third.
Correct, yeah.
Second,
Second's on
third,
Fulton.
fourth, yep.
What's it?
All right, our last item, which we are going to spend the remainder of our time on, and I'm gonna say hopefully we can do this in an hour at the most, maybe not. Let's see if we can do it faster. And just for the public, I wanna say, I wanna open by giving a tremendous amount of gratitude and thanks to the staff, to the director, for stewarding this for quite some time and working with the community and really at our request to the commission, as this administration actually inherited the townhouse code, and we've been trying to make it better, and I think this is a really exciting moment. So I want to first thank you for this, and I'm excited to move this forward. Second, to anyone who's here, to the public, today we are really, now staff will talk about this. This is just for information so that we have time to digest this as a commission, and we will actually be voting at a follow-up meeting. So we are not voting today. We are going to hear everything. They're going to hear our feedback and comments. And when it comes back, since this is zoning, we will take public comment. Today, I'm actually going to allow public comment as well, just double public process so that we can hear any comments. But the official comment period has been open for some time, and also we will take this again at the next meeting. More process is better. That's my mantra. More involvement from the community is better. To shape something very important and make it better. So with that as context, we'll turn it over to staff. I don't know if you want to start or you want Shannon to start.
I can just say that from a process standpoint, we had posted the original townhouse code draft online for about 40 days earlier this year. Shannon Leonard, Chief City Planner, took many of those comments, did quite a few more interviews, which she'll tell you about today. This is an updated draft, taking in some of those considerations. So with that, I'll turn it over to Shannon.
All right, good morning, Shannon Leonard, Chief Zoning Planner, City Planning Commission. Some of this is going to get into the weeds, so I'm going to try to keep it as simple as possible. If you could just follow along, and then I'll take any questions. So again, just to kind of refresh, there's a lot of things that go into when we write zoning code, and we have to balance a lot of different things. And some of those are the public health, safety, comfort, and general welfare. That's a mandated federal and state law. We also have to take into consideration private property rights for all citizens across the entire city of Cleveland and how those regulations affect private property rights. We also need to balance safe and walkable neighborhoods. We want predictability and clarity in our zoning code, transparency. We want to respect our community. We want context responsive compatibility. We also have objectives for missing middle housing and efficiency in customer service. Next slide, please. And so we did take in, we put this out back in December for 40 days, had public comments from a variety of sources. But some of those comments included clarifying the process and definitions, maintain current language regarding complementary and block sensitive. Landscaping requirements could be arbitrary, so please add some outdoor amenity space. Address the townhomes fronting alleys where appropriate, maybe looking within 100 feet in each direction, adding minimum lot area and minimum lot sizes. Next slide, please. Other comments included Comments about human scale materials, that should also apply to facades and auto courts. We should differentiate pavers from motor courts, pedestrian versus vehicle that's snow friendly. We need to make sure that we're using the word scale, complementary, compatible, and we need to balance regulations for context-sensitive projects while also allowing for new, flexible, different design approaches, architectural style that is in scale with the existing context. And so we took feedback and review not only for public comments from developers, architects. There were a variety of block clubs that sent in their comments, or I talked to specifically. We've had people in council send in their comments. We've had a lot of staff review. We had our fire official and building and housing review it. We had our chief building official review, our chief zoning administrator review. All of those people provided comments to me. Landmarks commission, a few members, as well as their staff commented and reviewed. Various organizations across not just the city of Cleveland. We also received feedback from people at the state in Columbus. We also reviewed best practices of other similar cities across the United States. And then we also have our law team reviewing it. So just to let everybody know, there's been tremendous amount of feedback, and then also you commission members have also reviewed some of them. So next slide, please. And so the goal of the update was to consider and process this public comment, clarify the process, really refine that conditional use and what that means and what that process looks in a single and two-family district, really refine our new definitions and regulations for motor courts, and then obviously to address the interior frontages, especially for interior lots. Next slide, please. And so the townhouse application process, this is the process of which it happens, in which we take in an application. Building and Housing will normally assign it to their zoning staff, but then they will also transmit it to city planning. City planning is responsible for making a recommendation to the planning director on which RA district applies based on the existing setback calculation. And so this new legislation really just refines how that works. Next slide, please. And so really, how do we determine whether it's RA1, the lowest density, to RA3, the most dense? It's really based on the setback calculation that we do in regular setbacks, the front yard setbacks. And that's really taking the average setbacks on the street. And then if it falls between 0 and 12 feet, then they qualify for the densest level of zoning or densest level of townhouses, which is the RA3. And then if it's anything beyond 20 feet, it generally falls. So in this case, this example, if you were to want to do townhomes, you would be, we would designate that as an RA1 district. And so that's the calculation that's in the existing code. And that's the calculation that we're proposing to move forward with because it makes the most sense and it's the best to administer, as well as keeping in context with our existing streets. Next slide. So what that really means is once we determine their setback, that will determine which set of regulations to follow to that RA3 to RA1 based on that setback. Next slide, please. And so we also went in and refined the purpose section. We added the term townhouse projects and we defined it. I'll walk through the definitions. Additionally, it was overwhelmingly clear by many emails that they wanted us to use vocabulary that discussed architectural design and continue to use the word compatibility, not to remove that. Next slide, please. Sorry, I just pulled it away. So just a real quick definitions in the zoning code. There's been a lot of feedback as to, well, these need to match the building code. We talked to our law department, we talked to our zoning administrator, we talked to the building official. Zoning code definitions are not required to and should not be the same as definitions in Ohio Building Code. The Cleveland and the Ohio Building Code draws from the International Building Code. Zoning code definitions are generally context-based to meet a purpose and are not general. Zoning code definitions also called out in any specific chapter are for a specific context. So example, in the townhouse code, they're specific to townhouses. and a pedestrian retail overlay district, they're explicitly for that pedestrian retail overlay district. Just to give an example, in our PRO district, we call daycares institutional. Daycares in most people's minds is not an institutional use, but in the context of a PRO that is there to respect the historic shopping districts, daycares and places of worship are considered institutional because they generally do not automatically comply with the needs of the PRO, with eyes on the street and things of that nature. They normally need to cover up their windows. And so definitions in the beginning of any specific chapter within the zoning code are specific and content specific for that specific section. And they take precedence over the general definitions throughout the remainder of the code or in section 325. Next slide. Next slide. Sorry. It seems to be. Next slide. Can you go back 3? I don't know if it's skipped over. Here we go. All right. So these are the definitions. Anything in green is normally a new language. And so single-family detached dwelling units are part of a townhouse project proposal and are located adjacent and fronting to a public right-of-way. They must be contiguous with other units, as well as any combination of single-family detached dwelling units, townhouse units, or townhouse buildings submitted as a package or considered a townhouse project. And so we're also changing the word principal to primary, and that's consistent throughout the code to be in alignment with other sections of the zoning code, as well as the future form-based code, as well as it's just a more acceptable term when you're talking about the main frontage. Next slide, please. And so what this means is if you have a single family or just a 1-unit townhouse unit fronting a primary street, it needs to be contiguous with the other units within that project. Next slide. At the same time, if you have a standalone single-family unit, townhouse unit that looks just like every other townhouse within, but is not connected to a building, it can be considered as part of the townhouse project, so that we're not applying different rules to it, as long as it doesn't make up more than 1/3 of the total project in terms of detached units. Next slide, please. And again, this is just a site of showing how that would fit in. It was a single detached unit was added to these to make the project work, bring it all together to be more appropriate in context to the project. And so we judged it under the same code. Next slide, please. Okay, next definition is adding motor court. You all saw this before. And so it's really just an internal private road for townhouse project allowing vehicle, pedestrian, and bicycle access from the public right-of-way to private garages, and just defining those items. Next slide, please. And this is just another example. Next slide. So these definitions that we're also adding include the principal pedestrian entrance. It's an exterior door exclusive to the dwelling unit that offers a pedestrian the most visible and direct means of ingress into a public right-of-way or private walkway. A private walkway is any sidewalk or passageway located on a privately owned property. Used unit is any townhouse unit on an interior frontage whose principal pedestrian entrance is located opposite of motor court, fronting a private walkway, and at the side lot line is going to be removed. So the difference between an interior frontage is the frontage itself, and then the muse unit is explicitly for those units that are fronting generally the side lot lines, or they're just not on an actual street frontage. Next slide. Oh, transition. That's an additional setback, a buffer requirement, and reduced height allowance when certain districts abut specifically defined districts with lower use intensity or height intensity. Next slide. So townhouses and townhouse projects in single and 2-family districts, this applies mostly to this commission. You do have the authority to determine whether the proposal meets all applicable site planning and architectural design standards established in subsection E to ensure proper design and compatibility with existing uses. And all townhouses will go through either housing, 5 or less units will go through housing design review. Anything above that will go through local design review. And then if they're in a 2-family district or more strict than multifamily, it'll come to you for City Planning Commission approval. City Planning Commission holds the power for conditional uses according to our zoning code and charter. Next slide, please. And so we really just kind of refined this. We went back to this because this really gets to the core of the responsibility of making sure, using design review to really make sure that, you will use these 4 categories to determine if the use meets the criteria for conditional use. So we're talking about townhouse use in a more strict district than multifamily. You're really looking at compatibility. It should be compatible, visually compatible with nearby properties with respect to such residential design elements as scale, height, setbacks, orientation to existing streets, roof lines, architectural character, materials, colors, and proportions of architectural features. You'll also look at the site layout. You'll look at building features, and you'll look at circulation and parking as it relates to providing proper access for service and safety vehicles, minimizing conflicts between pedestrians and vehicles, minimize the number of curb cuts, maximize opportunities for on-street parking, transit waiting environments, bike lanes, drop-off zones, street furniture, public amenities, and preserving street trees by prohibiting front-loaded garages and unenclosed parking in front yards. And you'll prohibit placement of garage doors so close to the sidewalk as to impair pedestrian safety. Next slide, please. And so what does that look like? You're looking at the different requirements as it relates to, and you'll rely a lot, obviously, on design review as you normally do, to help get these projects going. And site planning and design should meet the height and front yard setback. So this is an example of how a newer build could fit in with the existing context. Next slide, please. The relative height and massing and surrounding context, what that looks like, and how the applicant should demonstrate those items. Next slide, please. Roof forms and frontage features, you're looking at, the typical roof form along the street. Similar to design review, you would want similar roof form or frontage features or something that's compatible or in context. Next slide. And again, these are the frontage features that are listed. We're not changing these. Next slide, please. And then circulation and parking, you obviously want to follow those parameters as it relates to the circulation of the site itself. And where parking is going to exist, if it's going to exist. Next slide, please. And so the next, we'll go through like how we're addressing these muse units or these interior frontages in the code. Next slide, please. And so these are the area, yard, siting, and design standards. There's been some changes. What we've gone through is and changed some of the items, and I'll go through each specifically. But we've also added a section for muse units to address those units specifically and as it relates to the comments that we received from the public. There's been a lot of conversation about why we do not have minimum lot sizes in this section, and that's really because 84% of all lots in the two-family district are already substandard across the city. And so adding the lot sizes, I think, is really dependent on the site and the configuration as these projects come through and allowing flexibility in terms of design. We've also added the interior frontages. We've just changed all 3 districts to 10 feet setback. Same with the muse units, if they're going to be on the site, they'll all have a 10-foot setback for their front yards. We've also gone in and changed the rear yard depths for the RA3 district as a request from the fire department from 0 to 3 feet. Next slide, please. And then going forward, we've also, the muse units, that's regarding active first floor. The key for, a lot of times with the garage placements, it doesn't allow for the active first floor in our townhomes. And so we've not only required it for the principal frontage, but also any of the muse units, you need to have some active first floor space to really have eyes on those muse interior frontages. And then for the entrances, any muse unit, I'm so sorry, I'm blind. Any muse unit more than 150 feet from a street line needs to provide a pedestrian entrance directly to the motor court. And that's really to handle that situation where you have some of those deep lots and wanting to make sure that we have entrances, but also we don't want to cause the vehicle pedestrian impact potential possibility. And then we're also—
Technical question. That, how many units does that mean you could have without that?
So the other,
without the door, like how many units does that translate to? 3?
So for every 3 units you have, you need to have at least 1 door generally. That's what we had on the—
If it goes more than 3 units, those back units must have the man door, if you will, on the drive.
Yes. Or if the lot is so deep that it's more than 150 feet.
Got it.
Standard lots in Cleveland are like 100 to 100.
Yeah. Okay.
So those will qualify for those really deep lots that we saw for the Puff Bakery project. They would require it.
Okay.
Automatically.
Okay, got it.
And then for the height of the finished first floor above grade, we did add the muse units to be similar to the interior frontage units. And then we're also adding private open space for square footage per unit based on the district you're in. And that was really something that was requested by the fire department. What they've seen with the influx of these new townhomes is that there's a lack of amenity space, which that's one of the market drivers for those units. Is some people don't want a yard to have to maintain. That's one of the reasons. And so what happens is their amenity space ends up being on rooftop decks. And unfortunately in Cleveland, after 2 years of snow, the fire department has seen an uptick in fires because people are grilling or whatever have you. And so they asked us to add some open space for those units. So that's proposed in here, just a little bit private open space, And then the next thing is the transitions, and really requiring anything above 2 stories to be set back when you're next to a district or within a district that's less strict than automatically required for townhomes. And that's something that we've pulled, that's best practice, but also helps keep things in context, but also is part of the new form-based code that you guys will see, hopefully later this year. Next slide, please. And then again, this is just showing the building design. It's just another image of something that has recently opened on East 120th Street in Ashbury. Next slide. And then talking about garages, car openings, driveways, and motor courts. I apologize, can't see the slide. For motor court landscaping, the 25 square feet, motor court paving. So there was a lot of comments about this, and really the goal of this is really to differentiate between where cars go, where pedestrians go, and so adding that option here. And then there's a few footnotes down here, and that just kind of defines what does that outdoor or private amenity space look like in the rear yards. Next slide, please. And again, this is just a calculation for the landscaping in the auto court. And the auto court is really not something that we want really to be enunciated or motor court here. So next slide, please. Next slide. And so because we don't want that motor court enunciated, we are proposing getting rid of this image because that really kind of does the opposite of what we really want to see with our townhomes and our townhome projects that come through the city of Cleveland. This is capability to city planning and building and housing to make a very small percentage change. And that's really just for 2 feet here, no more than 5 feet there, to allow for that to happen without having to go through the full Board of Zoning Appeals process, because those are always granted at the Board of Zoning Appeals. And then I've clarified the procedures and appeals and what that looks like in terms of submission of application, what the applicant needs to submit. It's in alignment with our design review requirements. The determination of compliance, the Division of Building and Housing shall determine if the application conforms to the requirements of this chapter and other applicable regulations of the City of Cleveland, except for the requirements as determined by City Planning Commission or its director. There's a referral to City Planning Commission. This is much like any project that comes through. It's the same language as it relates to what falls under City Planning's purview. And it's nothing different. And then the City Planning Commission action for townhouse projects located in any zoning district where townhouse use is not permitted by right in a 1-family or 2-family, the City Planning Commission shall review any application to conditional approval and shall determine whether the proposal meets all of the applicable standards in Division E of Site Planning and Design to ensure proper design and compatibility with surrounding uses. The city planning will take action at a public hearing, really just labeling that out, and then we will notify the public. We will not send out notices to surrounding properties. We'll do what we similarly do for Board of Zoning Appeals now, is where we will place a placard that the director is holding on the property. We will also make a public notice on our website, And that's really really because outside of this, the only thing that we actually send notices out for conditional uses is the wireless telecommunication facilities. We would have to start sending them out, for all conditional uses in our code. There's over 12 conditional uses in our code. And so I think that becomes an administrative issue in terms of cost and just administering in general. And so that's the proposal, is for, using those notices. Those have worked pretty well for BZA. And so I think that would work really good for, a new townhouse development, as well as obviously the announcements.
And I will say that we would modify this to be like TH Townhouse, be its own unique set of colors and brand. And that way it's actually not just accessible to the immediately adjacent neighbors, but it's to others passing by. It allows for the case number, address, description, hearing date and time, and location that will be written in by staff members, and will be up to the proposer to pick these up from City Hall. There's also QR codes, email address, phone number, in case anyone else wants to find out more information. And so, we felt that was a new solution as opposed to the hours it takes to mail out letters for our staff members.
It'll hold up in the rain.
Yeah, these typically will hold up. They've been out in the wild for a long time.
Yeah. And you can see them. We were driving around the other day in the Broadway district, and we saw a couple of them. So they're pretty clear, I think, and hit all the touch points in terms of content. Next slide. And so that's the update, and for the code. I just want to make a few comments as it relates to the interior frontages and the muse units have been a big, huge topic of conversations across the board. There's people that absolutely hate them. There's people that absolutely love them. There's people in the middle, you name it. I really thought about it. I really consulted a lot of people in it. And I think as it relates to those units, and a lot of them are being proposed in the 2-family districts, I think that speaks to the larger point of two things. One, we go from 1-family, 2-family to multifamily. There's no in between in our current zoning code, whether you have 3 units, 4 units, 5 units. But also, I believe that our design review is fully capable in helping make good decisions as it relates to the orientation and the site planning of these projects. And I think that this commission is fully capable to do that. And rather than over-regulating items in our zoning code, I think leaving out that flexibility can create really great projects and help get rid of those projects that might not be so great. Thank you.
I think what we'll do, if it's okay, we're going to allow public comment. I'm going to ask for people who are online who want to speak to raise their hand, and that you state your name clearly. And I will be keeping time to keep everybody to 3 minutes or less, so that the commission members can give comments, and August has to leave. So if we get close to 11:30, I need to give you a chance to say anything, because we're not voting today. We're taking feedback, and we will take public comment officially too at the next meeting when we vote on this matter. So if you are online and would like to speak, please raise your hand, and we'll go from there. So anybody who'd like to speak to this matter? Not seeing anybody who would like to speak. Yeah.
David also is waving his.
Oh, you're waving your hand, not raising your hand. Got it.
Yeah,
okay.
thank you. I don't know where the button to raise. Oh, there it is.
There it
Now
is.
I see it. Sorry about that.
Okay. So, go ahead.
Thank you. Faye Harris and I are here together this morning, and thank you for preparing this and sharing it with the commission and with us. And we're looking forward to taking a closer look at it when we get a copy of this PowerPoint presentation or the revised language. So thank you. I think that we would have appreciated a more open and collaborative process in coming up with the solution to the townhouse problem. And we know that there's litigation on the subject of townhouses that may be part of the driving force behind the revision of the townhouse code, and that's been in court for, I think, almost 3 years now. So hopefully the eventual update to the code will address those problems. But I think one of the main reasons that case is in court is because of the lack of the floor area ratio. And whether or not the old pre-zoning code lots are compliant with the 1 and 2 family requirements doesn't mean that we collectively as the city of Cleveland couldn't impose a floor area ratio that would be appropriate for townhouses within 1 and 2 family districts. And that would address a lot of these problems like the fire department identified with space and the room around the townhouse units. So we're disappointed that the proposed updates do not include a minimum lot size for a townhouse unit and a townhouse project. And as you might know already, the Council of Cleveland Neighborhoods has a really strong opinion about these sideways and rear-facing townhouse units that look into the backyards and side yards of 1 and 2 family districts. So we appreciate the 10-foot setback. So thank you for changing that uniformly across the RA 1, 2, and 3 districts. And I think I'd like to turn it over to Faye for her comments, please.
Thank you. Thank you, David.
Okay, I'm ready to speak as of right now. I don't think this townhouse code, the revision, as of today with the presentation, we're not there yet. And I think there were some crucial things that the Council of Cleveland Neighborhoods did point out compared to the zoning code from 1996 all the way up to 2006 that could have been incorporated. And then we were only concerned with the 1 and 2 family district, and that still is not identified. So I think there needs to be, continuous work, and we could wrap this up. But I think that it was very hard to work with the Department of City Planning. It seems like their strategy was that not enough information coming from the neighborhoods. Now, we've been involved with the townhouse code ever since 2019, and we've even tried to work with the previous administration as well as the existing administration, and it just doesn't seem like we're quite there yet, because we don't want to see future litigation. We do want to see townhouses being built in our neighborhoods, but we want to make sure that the private homeowners nearby don't have to worry about hiring an attorney or filing a lawsuit against the city of Cleveland. So again, I feel we're not there yet. That's all I have to say.
Super. Thank you. Anyone else online who'd like to speak to this matter, just raise your hand. Or if you can't raise your hand, just wave or something like that. All right, I don't see anyone else, so I'm going to close the public portion now and ask for commission members if there are comments, questions, any feedback for staff.
I just wanted to say, and I'm sure Charlie will probably follow up on this. I just want to ensure that we're not trying to craft something that's for a specific neighborhood. I think what we need to do is be cognizant of the fact that it's very diverse and very neighborhoods. There are areas that are redlined. There are areas that there's been disinvestment. And so, I always like looking at things as a start. Obviously, we're here because the previous townhouse code sort of netted some things that we weren't desirable in some cases. But hopefully there's a willingness to beta test this and see if what we're trying to achieve works. We don't know until that happens. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Thank you.
I have a couple comments on that. Go ahead. Okay. So first, I think this work in cities is iterative, and the way cities shape and even code up to this point and going forward has been to make it better and to learn and to grow. So I want to thank the staff because I think some of for me, the pain points that I had previously that we had a hard time kind of, making sure that we could hold accountable, this addresses. So for me, and I'm just going to point out a few, which is for the most part, I think that I'm of that most people want to do the right thing and build well and do what's right for community. But then there's a few people who want to do it as least as possible. And in some ways, this code is getting to the point where it's allowing the kind of flexibility for innovation and good things to happen while kind of holding the line on the things where, quote unquote, people who want to, go too far in terms of, let's say, profitability in the expense of neighbors. And so the ones I'd point out for me are the idea of the muse and ensuring that we don't create units that people don't have kind of public facing front doors and create safety concerns. I think this addresses that in a way that I think we can hold the line. That's important. We couldn't hold the line before I tried. Multiple times. Second is, I think it helps us hold the line on the auto courts, whatever you want to call them, in terms of requiring landscaping and pedestrian access in a way that might create special and beautiful places if people want to do it right, and allows us to stop it when people just want a sea of asphalt, right? These are the things that will make interesting and quality places. So I'm not going to go through all of them, but the point I want to make about this is that I think this and the work that staff has done is closing some loopholes that did not allow us to hold the line on the things that make quality places. And I am hopeful that as this moves forward, that if other things emerge, that the staff will be willing to address them as we go forward, because this may or may not be perfect, right? But making these changes, I think, is required now so that we can move forward. And so I want to thank you for that, and for listening to us and others in the community to find these very, very minutia-oriented things that are absolutely critical for us to be able to do the job that we do and hold people accountable. And that was what was missing for me, to be able to ensure that. So thank you. And I know we'll do more work between now and when this comes to a vote. I think Councilman has some comments as well.
Yeah, thank you to staff. I think that, I speak for myself, maybe others, that the town hall, every time a townhome project comes, it feels so convoluted and confusing and the requirements. So I think that a lot of where we have the frustration in the past has been because of how confusing or not intuitive the townhome code was. So any effort to clean that up, I think, is going to benefit all. It's going to benefit developers who, to share your point, the developers who want to do the right thing but are maybe confused by the guidelines, will also be beneficial to the residents. They can kind of have some understanding, not just of what the product would be, but what the process is. I really echo August's statement that, look, I think everyone in every Cleveland neighborhood cares about their neighborhood and what they want to see new development. They want to make sure that new development isn't going to consume their neighborhood and fundamentally change it. But I have to say, not all neighborhoods are as engaged as some. And I just personally believe that some of the drivers of this conversation, where we've been seeing townhome development most densely, the level of community engagement exceeds that of other neighborhoods, sometimes to an extent where I think that we are being asked to really go beyond our purview and kind of micromanage, kind of weaponizing the code for local desires. So by cleaning up the code, I think that we can kind of tamp that down and have a more even process that benefits the entire city. Because we're looking at townhome developments in Ward 17 too, and I want to make sure that whatever we pass is not tailor-made for one neighborhood, but then going to become equally as problematic in another. I guess the only thing, and this is kind of a question back to staff, the one that I struggle with is compatibility, just because I think that it's really subjective. And I guess I struggle with, and if you kind of want to comment on it, kind of the intersection of like not just up zoning, but like up designing. Because I think that we have portions of the city that are zoned correctly for townhomes, or we would agree are compatible or justify the density for townhomes, but maybe the existing product there is not what you would certainly be building in the year 2023. These are older houses that maybe don't have the number of rooms or amenities that really meet the current market demands or expectations. And I'm trying to figure out how do we kind of balance kind of the expectation of the current market against kind of that compatibility side. Because some of the, you know, if there's a 1.5-story building next to this sample picture, and we're gonna build a 3-story, you know, I think that there have been some instances where is the 1.5-story product really the sustainable product moving forward? And do we need to recognize sort of the need to up design to be able to continue to keep the neighborhood strong, people moving in, getting mortgages, things like that. So I don't know if you want to kind of, because up designing is a term I made up. We talked about up zoning. It's like we talked about up zoning, but like what happens when we've zoned correctly, but the design is still not meeting the spirit of the zoning?
Yeah, I appreciate you answering that, asking that, Councilman. A couple things. So back to Commissioner Member Kluger, as well as your question, as it relates to not wanting to tailor-made this code for a specific district or neighborhood. You know, that was a lot of conversation is why, you know, not requiring the minimum lot size, and then as well as dealing with the interior frontages and adding setbacks and open space was to help kind of, on one hand, balance those demands, but also leave it open-ended for projects that are in weaker markets or stronger markets, right? And so really allowing that flexibility as it relates to the word compatibility. Xavier, if you could go back a couple slides. I'd
like to comment on that as well.
Yeah, this was a huge conversation as it related to a lot of the comments we received. The language that we had proposed previously under the 2021 edition of this was, yeah, right here, good. Was, you know, under the 2021 edition was the people did not want to see that because Constant was not quite what they wanted, which is what you're kind of suggesting is, you know, in this context, it's a 1.5-story, but in this market to make these sustainable projects to be affordable or to whatever have you, to design them in today's construction market needs to be a little bit taller. And how do you balance that? And so constant wasn't the word that the design community wanted us to use. They wanted us to use compatibility, scale, proportion. So maybe you're not necessarily the same height, but you have the scale and proportion down that would help make that more compatible with the design professionals looking over these projects. And then the transitions, right? So you have that 1.5-story, and maybe that's zoned 1 family, but this district is 2 family. Then you can have the step down on those outer units to kind of blend in with the higher districts along the way. So that's what kind of both those requirements would help do. But I am leaving the flexibility for the design to the design review bodies in this commission or landmarks commission, because I feel like you all are better suited to help make those decisions, those design decisions with the applicant, than just codifying it strictly outright, because then we turn into being more exclusionary for all markets. And I, last year at this time, had a little step away from the city of Cleveland and went and experienced zoning in North Carolina and saw the opposite extreme of zoning, right? Where zoning is mostly mandated by the state. And, you know, they have districts and there's really no flexibility. Either you can do it or you can't do it. And you can't get use variances. You have to rezone. So I had that step away, and that really gave me perspective with our current zoning code and the future of zoning. And so I really am a big, I really think flexibility and having our commissions and boards that are staffed the way they are and appointed the way they are really help make those decisions with some baseline requirements to achieve the things that, you know, were the main goals of this project.
I could add to that. I'm sorry. Do you want to respond?
All right, go for it.
Yeah, so this is to the comment about compatibility. And Cleveland Restoration Society had a strong response to it. We met with them actually the same day. They sent the letter and did the advocacy efforts, because I was personally curious about the word compatibility. And their board member, Anthony Hiddy, who is historic preservation architect, actually believes that compatibility provides more flexibility than the word constant, because constant just means like sort of copy paste in a way. And that's his reading of it, that his interpretation. Whereas compatibility allows for, taking elements and updating the design, taking elements from the existing fabric, but then creating compatibility, meaning that there's of its time type of situation. And my other question was, let's just take a neighborhood like St. Clair Superior, and that was my example when I spoke with the Cleveland Restoration Society. There's been a lot of demolition, there's a lot of vacancy. What happens when there's only a few buildings left and there's not as much context? And what does that mean for the word compatibility? And during that discussion, it was expressed that it's still flexible enough to allow for new forms, because their neighborhoods will evolve. And some neighborhoods have a very similar look, some are historic districts. Other ones are kind of funky and have lots of different stuff going on, and that's okay. Both can exist in the city of Cleveland, and ultimately the conclusion was compatibility would still really resonate the most from the design language standpoint.
I have a process question. This is just for me, and if you want to answer it next time, you can, so we don't have to do it today. But I just want some clarity on where now this sits on the agenda. Is it a zoning matter? Do we take public hearing, public comment, public testimony? Do we treat it like any rezoning? Or is it going to sit like conditional use? Like, help me understand where we're going to place this on the agenda, and procedurally, how we'll treat it from a public comment point of view.
Yeah, so I think I will rely heavily on Michael here, but this is a text amendment. And so generally for text amendments, those are zoning issues because it's a zoning code text amendment. And we normally take public comment, right?
No, I don't mean next week.
Yeah.
I mean in life in general, going
Oh,
forward.
yes, going forward. So for conditional use cases, we have historically been taking public comment, right, Michael?
Like, where will it
Michael
sit on the
question.
agenda? So on this agenda today, we have zoning map amendments.
Oh, it's conditional uses.
So it'll sit under conditional uses. It'll be after zoning.
Well, let me rephrase. So for townhouse projects they're permitted by right in multifamily and above, right? In 2-family and single-family districts or in a townhouse district, they would come to you for a conditional use permit.
Okay.
If there's more than 5 units, they come to you for design review.
As well.
As well.
Okay. So, and when we're saying they come in conditional use, just for me to remind, because there are many conditional uses that we see, right?
Yeah.
We will treat them as zoning issues. You will have put the signs up. We will read the same preamble. You will go through it, and we will allow public comment, and then we'll treat it the same way.
Yes, and I think to drill down the public comment in terms of the conditional use, people can either send in their address, because if those cases end up ever in court, they need to know who was making comments.
Got it. So we'll treat it like a zoning matter. Okay, that's good. Good to hear.
I have one other question. Now, this is really separate kind of from my previous comments, but just out of curiosity, I can't imagine that any of these projects that have been built haven't had some sort of HOA, like common area. Has that been discussed though? Are we able to regulate that? And I ask because there's a set of streets in Ward 17 of attached housing that don't have any sort of like common area or like common use agreements, and it's becoming a major maintenance issue because it requires parties to agree to coordinate without any legal structure. So I'm wondering if moving long term, we want these to endure over time when they're 20 years old from now. How are we able to ensure that there's some sort of common maintenance to roofs and facades and things like that, knowing that these are parceled off into individual like condominium units, but that there's still a collective need? Are we able to do that? Have we discussed it?
Yeah, we've discussed it, and it's something I follow with the law department. On the projects that we've passed since 2018, I've gone through the 30 projects or so that have been passed. There's been more than that, but those generally, there's several projects that, some of them, the smaller developments tend to, that's a private property issue because they're not condos, so they don't operate the same in meeting that HOA. But there are several projects like the one that I showed you on Ashbury Point, the ones down here on the avenue, specifically like the Kinez Homes and some of the other ones, developers, they own the parent parcel, which would say that they own that easement. And that's where that common maintenance agreement is. Some of these projects, there was one that was recently on Scranton that is 6 units. And our first statement, for one of their facade changes was, are you part of an HOA? And that HOA, those units have been there for at least 15 years. They said that their HOA doesn't exist anymore. So that's something I can explore with the law department. But I don't know, I know that might drill down on some of the private property rights as it relates to how that works, but that's a good question.
That's all I got.
Anything else? I don't know. I just want to stand up for Shannon Leonard because I mean, you saw the list.
Not enough people here.
Immense
4 years ago, it would have been raucous applause.
I mean, I want to put on the record, she met with the commenters today. They came in for a meeting and, we've reviewed their comments at length. I sent Shannon a 3-day zoning retreat to review all the public comments, to review the code. Nobody else bothered her, just focus on these big codes. And so I just want to stand up for her because I just think she really is intentional about wanting the best products and closing loopholes. And she really takes into account, I think you're very sensitive to wanting to hear all the voices and coming up with the right balance. So I just want to stand up for her and say that she's a treasured member of the team and does a great job with these codes. So
I appreciate those comments. I don't want to be known as Shannon Leonard, the destroyer of neighborhoods either. So, I really did. If you go back a couple slides, Xavier, there was several architects, several developers, regular citizens sent in emails, council people sent in emails. We've talked to block clubs. I met with block clubs. I met with real estate groups. I talked to staff across our department, talked to landmarks. I talked to the Board of Zoning Appeals. I talked to our chief building official, the zoning administrator. I've talked to the law department. I've talked to the various organizations, AIA. We heard from the Cleveland Restoration Society, the Cleveland Historical Society. Just a variety of people across the city and the state. Some people from Columbus sent in messages. And I've really thought about this and really given it thought. I've done a lot of research. I've compared all the projects that have gone through. I will say that a lot of these projects that do have the Muse units have not yet been built. And they do have a little bit of a different price point, that's lower, that's more affordable than some of the other prices. So, that was another reason why, really taking some of that data and thinking about it. And it's to the point now that I'm having dreams about the townhouse code, which is why I'm trying to come up with the best townhouse code to satisfy all those goals. And so I appreciate the comments, but another thing just to remind us is that give this a go. We vote on it. The council will vote on it. If we find out that this doesn't meet those goals or those things, that's one of the most beautiful things about our zoning code or zoning codes in general is that they're living documents and there's going to be a calibration period in which we'll need to make changes or in other words, even today with the map setback, I provided the 1943 Plain Dealer article for Xavier that showed where that come from. And, zoning then was trying to stop the great exodus to the suburbs. Let's just zone everything like the suburbs or, dealing with the race issues and things of that nature. And so, things are cyclical in nature and things change over time. And I think having a zoning code that can be flexible is ultimately the best route for us as a city. Thank you for everybody's time.
Okay, so we're not voting and we just for the commission, what will be the process in 2 weeks? We'll be taking public comment, we'll be voting, will you represent this?
I will represent this and the public will be able to make comment.
Okay.
And then it'll go from here, it'll go to the council.
There is a
And,
question online that says, how long will we be taking comment? I assume you'll be taking it up until the meeting, is that correct?
I mean, at the meeting itself.
No, meaning,
I mean, people are free to send comments anytime.
Okay.
You can send it to the main city planning email. You
Okay.
can send it to the email. They can drop off things here at City Hall.
Okay.
They can,
Okay.
make regular public comment. And I'll take all that
Okay.
information.
It can be either, so thank you very much.
To the chair, and to the commission, the presentation will be online after this, as well as on YouTube for anyone who wants to review the video. And the legislation itself, the text itself will be uploaded sometime early next week after we get the green light from the law department.
Okay. Okay. And that's, you mean on the website? It'll be on your website? Okay.
And just quick clarification, we're talking about the next meeting. We do 1 and 3, but we're meeting today because of Good Friday.
That's right.
So our next meeting is the
So
21st.
that's a great segue to the director's report.
All right, sorry,
That's
sorry,
okay.
sorry.
No, it's okay. And so
It's down
yes,
my
to your
calendar.
point, we do not have a meeting next Friday due to Good Friday. City Hall is closed that day, so our next meeting is Friday, April 21st, so 3 weeks away. Just some departmental updates. As of today, we have posted a big job called the Principal Planner, Public Realm and Major Projects. This person not only will handle the downtown and flats design review district, but a lot of the public realm projects that have been coming through this administration with regard to big public parks, lakefront, riverfront, including the massive development plan that Bedrock has proposed, as well as other public realm goals that the mayor has himself. So things like open street pilots and other parklets and things like that. So this job is posted. Please feel free to check it out. We are also going to be posting next week a strategic planning analyst job, which primarily will deal with data, translating data into maps and policy, assisting the zoning section likely on some GIS mapping and needs, maintenance. Sadly, Drew Sarabian has moved on from the planning department to another department, urban analytics and innovation. He is a map mastermind, I should say. So we're happy that he's staying with the city and ultimately will be influencing the enterprise around GIS data and map making. And we do have current job postings that are closing today at 11:59 p.m., including the major transportation projects coordinator in the planning department and 2 other transportation focused jobs in capital projects, including completing green streets and a special projects manager for big capital infrastructure projects. So a lot happening, a lot happening, a lot of jobs now aligning with the mayor's priorities and goals as well. Next slide. Zoning code updates, we talked about this already. Townhouse code vote will be April 21st. All other zoning code updates have not been scheduled yet, including the what we call small changes to zoning code. And then form-based code is hopefully going to go through an initial law review in April, and then we'll be bringing it to you for an just an introductory informational presentation later this year. The last thing I want to say, if I could tag on to the mandatory referral, just because I wanted to put on the record that I agree with Councilman Hairston regarding Port Gordon Park. It ought to stay an urban park. It ought to have amenities that are active amenities for all ages and all abilities. And I assured him that, I'm on the same page with him and wanted to echo your comments, Councilman, just so that, we are very mindful, and we will be mindful in that process moving forward that will be community driven amenities for that's it.
Thank you. So with that, the meeting is adjourned. Thank everyone online, and we'll see you April 21st if you're going to come back. So thank you all.
Right. Thank you.
So do we have the